Well, hey, welcome back to Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee, sponsored by Domino, who is a provider of Domino One, cloud-based collaborative authoring tool and learning content management system. I'm back. I just got back from a great extended vacation out in Indonesia and Singapore and scuba diving. Had a great time. I hope you had a great time with Chris while I was out. And of course, I don't know why, but Chris decided he needed a vacation. So you have just me today with our wonderful guest, Desiree. And we were chatting in the green room about Legos and building things and everything else. It seems, I know a lot of instructional designers and folks like building things. Go figure. So I wanted to welcome our guest. Desiree, why don't you introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about what brought you here today and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on here. This is fantastic. I have to say, I just want to preface this all with this is my very first live LinkedIn Live session ever in my whole career. So it is a first. My name is Desiree Hildenbrand. I am an instructional designer here in Marion, Iowa. And my background goes a long way, right? I started my career years and years ago at the Yellow Pages, right? So I worked for a company called Pindar, and we were the graphic design arm of the Yellow Pages. And I weaseled my way in there, and I was a digital artist for a while. I was a graphic designer. I led some instructional design, or I led some design teams. And then they needed a trainer. So they were like, hey, who wants to talk in front of people? And you know, that whole like the movie scene where everybody takes one step backwards and you're the only one left there. That was me, right? So that was the birth of my training career. Soon after I learned what an instructional designer was, and I was off and running. So, went back to school and did some more stuff. I know the Yellow Pages, like that takes us all way back, right? I don't know. There's a lot of people in my current job that I say, hey, I used to work for the Yellow Pages. And they're like,
no idea.
Yeah. I'm like, they're like, I don't understand. I was like, well, they used to drop the book off at your house. I don't know. Anyway.
They're like, why?
I know. Then I have to go through mentally and be like, okay, none of my cool 80s movie references are ever going to land with this person. So they're wasted, right? Then I just kind of started in instructional design, content creation, building e-learning, doing kind of the whole thing. And then about 13 years ago, I stumbled into immersive technology, which was augmented reality at the time was the big one that was a little more accessible and something to do. And that was sort of my pivot, right? I still did instructional design, but I sort of pivoted over and really found that new technology was sort of my jam, and how I could utilize that new technology and bring it into, the L&D space wherever I went. Had some great opportunities to work for a few companies as a learning developer for virtual reality, learning developer for, mixed realities. And kind of doing that, I'm super, blessed in the fact that I get to travel around the U.S. here and talk at a lot of different conferences about immersive technologies, the future of learning, technology and learning in general. So for those of you, who are watching, I'm sure you maybe have seen me on other things or at other locations, at other places. Probably not in Iowa, but I'm sure you've seen me on, in a much cooler place like Orlando or Las Vegas or things like that. So that's kind of the nickel tour of how I started, and now it's funny to think back of paginating, like putting the book together for the Yellow Pages, and now some days I just pop on my virtual reality headset and watch movies, right? So it's super neat to see just how the technology is sort of like evolved in that space.
You watch those movies where the technology that existed at the time created the plot, And today you would have to find a reason the cell phone doesn't work, the VR doesn't work, the AR doesn't work there. Um, but I was thinking about some of that too, and AR and VR, and I think if like most of us that have been around for a little bit, maybe not as long as the two of us there, but we've seen different things. For those who've been around a little bit longer, you saw mobile come, and like it was mobile everything, mobile this, mobile that, and it wasn't a flash in the pan, but the emphasis kind of de-emphasized. It kind of became part of the schema there, and then a few years later everyone had VR headsets on there, and it was all the rage, and everything's going to be this way. And if you weren't in this way, you were going to be gone. And then all of a sudden that disappeared. I mean, you did disappear completely, but it wasn't at every booth, everything, and every talk in the trade show. A few years later, of course, AI started to creep up there. But we were even chatting about how Legos, or Lego, as it's correctly said there, was dipping their toes into AR and VR a little bit, and using some of it still now in their stores, but not quite in their products as much anymore. But tell us a little bit about, what's kind of happening now. I mean, there was that big push. We saw some of it. There's obviously adoption. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Other companies that still exist and focus on that wouldn't be around. But it definitely didn't become like, oh, everything needs to be that, which those of us who have been around for a while thought it was a bit overhyped, very valuable probably, but not quite what it was being positioned at. And that's often the case. So now that's a bit more mature. Tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing now, what has changed, and what areas it's maybe been adopted in.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we tend to go all in on things, right? Like it's all or nothing one way or another. And you also pointed out that AI kind of came in, right? Like AI's been around for a while, but it really sort of hit, and it kind of took all of the other innovative oxygen out of the room. Like not in a super horrible way, but I mean, I use AI a lot, but if there wasn't any new AI tools for a while, I wouldn't be upset, like that kind of thing. But yeah, so immersive technology really did kind of sort of start landing in our space, especially in L&D. I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I would probably guess, and I know there's people out there that'll be like, well, hang on, but for me, I really started to see it sort of permeate everything that we were doing, the conferences we were going to. I had a lot more interest in the talks I was giving, starting about then. And there was real excitement for, hey, there's a new way that we can deliver content. And sort of like with any new technology, though, we weren't really sure how to deliver it or how to use it. So we started repurposing the things we were already doing just inside of this new, delivery or modality. That's kind of where we kind of dropped the ball a little bit. And it's tough. It's tough to kind of, put those things together. And then virtual reality. Boy, everybody loves the immersive option, right? Like for the most part, they were like, hey, this is really, really cool. I can see the value, putting people in dangerous situations without actually putting them in dangerous situations. They can practice over and over again. I don't have to waste resources on the things they're doing. I don't have to create elaborate training scenario spaces, right? I can just build it in the headset, and they can, as long as they've got a little 3-foot by 3-foot space, they can do all the training they need in there. But we ran into, and we still do to some extent, the cost of something like that just kind of, for most organizations, it really kind of exceeded, the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze in some of those things, right? To pull a sales reference out. And it just didn't quite land with them. And I think that all along the way, at least from my perspective and some of the people that I've talked to in the immersive space, we were really hoping that there was going to be some hardware like revolutions, right? There was going to be some things that happened that maybe brought down that cost or brought down the amount of resources and time that it takes to actually build some of these different things. And it just kind of didn't, right? There was some big companies out there, that were building headsets and were building stuff, but the smaller companies that were thinking about it, they just didn't quite get into the market the way we were hoping to really kind of bring those prices down and to bring, that kind of stuff. but also the technology is just, it's more advanced technology than what we typically do as instructional designers, right? For the most part, any one of us can open up any, content authoring tool, and we can hop in and start adding images. We can start adding videos. We can start putting stuff together. But when it came to this immersive side, especially virtual reality, it was really tough. Now, I will say that over the last year and a half, we've really started to see some advancements in wearable technology that sort of kind of meet in the middle, right? It's not just that handheld device augmented reality where you scan and things kind of come to life for you. And it's not a full like simulation where you put the headset on and you're completely detached from reality. But we're starting to see these like glasses that also don't look like you're in a steampunk movie, right? That don't look like you're from the future, that we're all, that people are starting to feel much more comfortable wearing, and they're adding some of that immersive functionality. And I think that's really where we're sort of headed now. And that'll do, a couple things. It'll bring the cost and the resources needed to use down, and it'll also make it a little bit more functional, because if we're just wearing these glasses and they just help us to navigate, train, interact, and do these things, it'll just kind of be the best of both worlds. At least that's what I'm really hoping for.
Yeah, I think a bit about that. For those who remember that, there was Google Glasses, and it seemed like, oh, maybe that would take off. I personally I wanted to get rid of glasses when I was younger. I don't want to go back to it. There, some people might disagree with that for their personal point of view there, but I think you hit on something there. As an industry, and we're not unique in this way, but there's something new. Hey, let's all kind of try to fit and squeeze into that particular area there. But I'm sure that as it kind of watered out, there were use cases where this really did make the difference. And I think we can kind of imagine some, but you've actually lived it and done some of those. What were some of the ones where the organization said, hey, yeah, this is worth it, you did it, and kind of the impact that it made, types of things. And as you're looking into it and talking to folks, and maybe you want to share one too, or they're like, yeah, they wanted to do it, we did it there, but at the end of the day, I'd have a hard time convincing any other company to do the same thing, because while it was cool, it really didn't add any extra benefit to it.
Yeah, and that last little bit there that you said is sometimes what we run into. But as far as use cases go, like anything that you need to get more hands-on with, right? Anything that you need to visualize, maybe in a more complex way, that's really where immersive technology kind of strives, right? So augmented reality, just to kind of level set here real quick, augmented reality, as we see it, as most people know it today, is just when we have a QR code of some kind that we scan. And what'll happen is it'll project, like it'll show up, it'll scan an item, it'll scan an object, and it'll enhance it in some way, right? It'll add images, pictures, it'll add videos, it'll add some other, content to bring it to life. I always like my favorite reference is like in the Harry Potter movies where the pictures come to life, that's really, that's kind of the idea, right? You're just using a device to help you bring things to life and give you more information about something. Mixed reality is sort of where that middle ground is that I was kind of talking about before. And it does kind of that same thing, but it also recognizes the world around us. So we see that there's a table, there's a chair, there's walls, and it'll start to interact with those things as well. We can put things on the wall. We can set avatars in the room. We can do those types of things. And then, of course, virtual reality is that fully immersed, you're detached from everything in that headset in there. So when it comes for use cases, right, augmented reality is fantastic for instant information, right? That moment of need that people have inside of their workflow, right? How do we keep people on the line? How do we keep people engaged in what they're doing? How do we not, pull them out of their day-to-day and still get them the information they need when they need it? And augmented reality is a fantastic way to do that. So imagine you're working, maybe you're building a widget, right? And they changed step 5. We got a new component. So I remember 1 through 4, and I remember 6 through 10, but 5, I just can't remember what they did, you know? So what do we pull them off the line? Do we send them to a training, in person? Do we have them watch an e-learning? Do we, whatever it is, what if we just had a QR code they scan and it instantly gives them the information they need? Here's the thing that changed. Oh yeah, that's it. Minimal downtime, minimal, it keeps them in their flow. So anytime that you could do something like that, to keep them in that moment of need, to help them in their moment of need, to get them to continue doing their job. Other ways, like if you think about it, anything that we want to get more information or marketing or, exciting stuff, like think about the ways where augmented reality is being used today. Do we have a product we want them to try on? Do we have a, IKEA, we can set up furniture in our room, right? That's a little more mixed reality. We can visualize the things we're trying to sell. Maybe it's a face filter of some kind. And like I said, we can have them try on something. We built one, a few years ago for a conference down in New Orleans. And we just made a whole bunch of Mardi Gras masks that everybody could try on, and they could take pictures and they could share it with the, with their peers and share it, on the, socials and stuff like that. So there's fun and engaging ways that you can build these types of content inside of there. When it comes to like virtual reality, that's the one where your use cases shrink down just a little bit, because it has about 5 or 6 like home run use cases, right? So again, that putting people in dangerous situations without putting them in dangerous situations, letting them to learn a skill, possibly, use a resource that is in the real world, it's finite, right? We have to pay more money for it. One of the examples that comes to mind is fire extinguishers, right? Does everybody know how to use a fire extinguisher? There's a process, right? It's called the PASS process. But I also know that refilling extinguishers is expensive, buying new ones, whatever the process is to get all of those things. So if you did it in a virtual reality headset, you can put them in any situation, right? Maybe they're working in a high rise of some kind that they're doing construction on. Well, let's put them on one of those floors so that it looks like it does in real life. And then they need to practice these safety skills. Maybe there's a safety skill in like high fall protection, or confined spaces, stuff like that. Well, we don't want to really put people in confined spaces, especially if they're not trained yet, right? I mean, there's ways to train them in real confined spaces and stuff. But what if we put them in the headset and they learn the process first inside of there before they do it? The cool part about that virtual aspect is that you can create any environment that you want. And it, to coin a phrase that, again, some of my younger coworkers probably won't know, but you can't change the laws of physics in the real world, but you can, right? Scotty was wrong. In like the holodeck, we could change everything and it doesn't matter. Like, what if we want to jump 10 feet, or we want to just teleport to different locations, or we want to just move freely anywhere through walls and back and forth, right? If we see an engine running, or we see a forklift going, what if we need to see how it runs? We can just stick our head right in there, right? So all of those types of things are possible, and we can completely, we can make it as realistic as we want, but we can also completely detach ourselves from the realism to get exactly what it is that we need to get to make sure that learning happens, or that knowledge transfer happens. So just, those are some of the things that kind of come to mind when you think about use cases. There are so many more, and there are so many great groups out there that are doing amazing work in this space. One more real quick here I'll say is there's the Meta Ray-Bans is a audio only enhanced augmented. I don't know if it's technically augmented reality, mixed reality. I don't know where it falls in that spectrum, but it just has cameras and AI and audio that will allow you to take a picture, tell me what I'm seeing, tell me where I'm at, translate this language for me, right? Those types of things. So another use case for this technology is, how can we help people who maybe are sight deficient, or maybe can't hear as well, or they have other physical limitations. Where does this technology land to help them overcome, not even overcome, but just adapt and still be a part of everything that happens in the world, with minimal interruptions to them. So there are still so many possibilities out there. And sometimes in L&D, we only have a certain amount of problems to solve. And it's hard to throw a lot of that technology at some of those just real basic problems we have to solve.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that, and you made me think. And of course, as I said, I was just on vacation, so I did a lot of touristy museums, and I was thinking, wait a second, most of us have experienced augmented reality at there. There's an audio tour. You're punching in the number. If it was a more advanced, more expensive technology, maybe I could just look at it, like you said there, and it would give me the audio piece there, or different places where you could have that scan code. And I'm thinking, a simple way folks could begin to take advantage of that type of approach is you probably had the training. They went through a course that covered steps 1 through 8, as you talked about it there. But then if your technology, which some do, like Domino, allow you to reuse it and repurpose it as a knowledge base and jump to specific steps like 5 or something like that, you could have a QR code if this is something that they're actually doing in a physical space, or they can easily look up a reference there in case they need to refresh their memory. With the existing technology, most folks would have like the phone or things like that, and not really have to do a lot extra, but bring the learning into the workspace, et cetera, there, and use existing technologies. And then you were also talking about usually I think VR, and of course the safe spaces. And I've seen hey, here's a very expensive simulator, but on the other hand, they're driving those big constructions where the tire is taller than us, type thing. So that's worth it. But then some of these other places, just being able, as you said, dip your head into the engine, seeing how that's working, work with some of those things, kind of putting it together. You don't get the tactile out of that unless you go that other further route, but even seeing it going together with the fire extinguisher and moving those steps, it's one step closer to the hands-on. It's not quite that hands-on. I've read the instructions for a fire extinguisher, but I'd have to reread them there, and I haven't visualized it and gone through it there, which again, going through it and doing it hands-on 15 times, maybe as a fire person, that would go up there, but seeing it virtually, I could see that could have an impact. With that in mind, maybe you could share a few of the different ones you put together where that had an impact, and they went that route, and as opposed to being unhappy with it, not necessarily unhappy, but go, we're not going to spend the money for the next job like that.
Yeah, so a couple come to mind, a couple big ones, right? So, when I was working with my friends up at Motive, we put together it was a mine. It was a mine safety hazard awareness, right? So you're in an open pit mine, which I can't even tell you how cool that was. I had never been to an open pit mine in my life, right? But we put in one of those giant like mine trucks, like you just got to stand next to it for a little while, and you're just like, wow, this is crazy big. Like I can't even imagine this in real life. But again, you have to walk through. There's a big rock crusher that's doing its gig, right? You have to walk through, and there's an excavator over top of you. We have to walk through, and we have to do things like let the excavator know that we're coming through. So you got to stop, like it's a safety hazard. We go through, and there's maybe there's some falling rocks, or maybe there's a wire that now is in a puddle that we have to make sure that we, disengage the transformer in a certain way so that, there's no additional issues inside of there. Another one that comes to mind, working for a company, and there was a set of planes that were in the air all the time, and they were communication driven in there, and they very rarely landed. And they had a specific type of antenna that was in there. So as new people came on, they never really got to see it installed or see that process happen, because when these planes landed, they had to get back in the air fast, right? There really wasn't a lot of, hey, let's just take a day. We're going to look through this and figure it out, right?
So race car pit stop.
Exactly, right? That's pretty much what it was. So you put them in the headset, they look at these things, they see how they build that muscle memory. And that's really what you're doing inside of VR, especially, right? You're building that muscle memory. And as you go in there, you're seeing it all, so that when you get to it, you may not, like you mentioned, you may not have had that tactile, I'm putting it together, moving it around type of thing, but you get like 70% of the way there. And that gives you an enormous head start, especially for those types of things, right? So that's another one that worked really well. There was one that I was part of, we built for a utility location, right? So they had the little transmitter, the scanner, and then they had the little spray paint gun, which when you do that in augmented reality, you can spray everything and it's amazing. Like, it's super fun. Like, I love that. But you have to, you connect your receiver, and you have to go through and, like, I called it the whoop whooper, right? You had to find it because it makes all those whoop, 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 whoop kind of noises, yeah. Right? Yeah. So, but you can do that. And you were able to find all those, spray where they were supposed to go. And again, you're kind of building that muscle memory. I always joke with my wife when we drive by anybody doing that in real life. I'm like, and she goes, I know you could do that. Right? Like I've never done it in real life, but I did it so many times when I was building it, right? It's in there. So,
as a trainer, one of the advantages we get if you're an instructional designer is you become a almost expert in a lot of things.
You absolutely do.
Became a loan expert, even though he wasn't in that industry. Yeah.
Yep. No, 100%. 100%. Some of the other things that I've seen that I've been a part of and built in mixed reality and virtual reality is also, interacting with avatars. So, you can connect an avatar with an AI, back end, and you can have soft skill conversations, right? Emotional intelligence, difficult conversations. Maybe we have to practice letting someone go, which is never a great thing, right? But those types of conversations, because a lot of times, you're role playing in training, or even in some leadership positions. I know people that never got trained on how to do that stuff, but then they were expected to, right? Yeah. You hope that HR has some sort of background in it when they come to help you, and you hope that they show up to the meeting, right? When you're going to do something like that. So
and they don't look at you as you're supposed to do everything.
Exactly. But, think about the amount of time, like role play is a big one. Role play is huge, because role play is tough to do in real life, because how do we, we're in front of other people. If the person goes before us and they did a really good job, I'm just going to copy them because they did it right. Like, I'm not going to really go off on my own little tangent here in this case. Well, maybe I would, but I don't know. Maybe typically most people wouldn't. But imagine being able to practice that conversation over and over with no consequences, one way or another. Right. And then maybe a mentor comes in and listens, and watches. Maybe they're another avatar in the room and they can give you real-time feedback, or you can record and they can give you feedback after the fact. And then, once you've practiced how, the company or the process or whatever it is wants you to react, you can come back in and be that much more prepared for when something happens. If you think about any task-based anything, right? Whether it's a conversation, whether it's a physical task that you do, the more you do it, like they always, practice makes perfect kind of a thing, right? That's that whole adage. And then of course my high school band teacher was like, no, perfect practice makes anyway, doesn't matter. Right? He was a good guy. He just tried to push us, that's how they do it. But yeah, practicing these things. So then when you get there, you're not just like, oh, wait, what was that thing I had to do? What was the bit that we had to do? One of the recent ones I did was, for entering a building and putting in the alarm code. And we have like 30, 40 different locations, and each alarm code sometimes looks different or is, positioned differently. So you can't really just show them one and be like, this is how it works, right? So you go in and you take a picture, or you take a 360 video of somebody walking up They go in, they can be immersed, they can watch it on their browser, they can watch it in their handset, but they physically see, here's how we do it. And then, you can just put them right back into it and be like, okay, here's the steps. Where do you go? What buttons do you push? How do you arm it? How do you disarm it? Like that kind of stuff, right? So anything physically that we need to get hands-on doing, those are the types of things that I gravitate towards when it comes to how can we add an immersive technology option that fits, right? Like I want to do technology for the sake of technology all the time because it's awesome. But I also understand, coming from an instructional design background, that is a terrible philosophy to have, right? It's not great at all. But if we can find a way to blend all of these things together, right? Maybe there's an e-learning piece, there's an in-person piece, and now here is an immersive piece that helps you to, to get more out of what it is that you're looking for. So
yeah, as you're kind of chatting the different examples, and those are all awesome, kind of different ways I could see where that worked. Kind of started to see some themes for the VR aspect of it, and one is I thought about is there a lot of sensory information going on? So I think of the mind, you think of there's a lot of different things going on. There's the puddles, the sounds, even the alarm. Just the fact, hey, that alarm's going to go off, that shocks you. That's the design of that in there. So when there's a lot of sensory information going on, the more of that to me says, oh, this may be a better VR experience. And then the other thing I was thinking about, and I thought back to a study I had read when VR and AR was coming out there, and they did a VR experience of folding clothes properly for a laundromat. They found that actually did not help increase the training there. And I thought, well, you tactile and doing things there, but to what extent are you doing that? I think touching it in there, seeing those different things, but seeing the clothes folded, I don't think that would have it made sense where some of these other ones, that combination, and of course, high stakes, those seem to be kind of the three themes that are going through there, and kind of led me. So you're talking about the practicing and the conversations. Hold that thought. I want to come back to, okay, so we see a lot of avatars, and how is AI tying into it? In what cases maybe VR is better than just a plain old avatar talking? Because a lot of things you described, honestly, you could just be doing that. How would VR make it a little bit better? But had some great questions in the chat there. When does augmented reality become performance support? And my first reaction as I was thinking about that is, when is it not performance support? So on that.
Yeah, no, I think that it could be like it's performance support. Like I mentioned in the example, right? The QR code that you scan, like it could have any information that you need, any information that you have going on inside of there, right? So you could have so whatever it is that you need, as far as like if you need instant information, if you need to give people, we were just at the Omaha Zoo this last weekend, right? And we were trying to use the map. And if there's anybody from the Omaha Zoo listening, unfortunately, we did not appreciate your map as much as I think you wanted us to, right? In that particular case. But I thought, gosh, if there was a couple spots where you could scan a QR code and it would bring the map to life, but it didn't really help us navigate it. So imagine you need to navigate somewhere, or you need to get somewhere and do something. You scan it and it gives you the instant route that you need. Again, with the newer technology coming out, hardware coming out, what if we were hands-free and I just had my glasses and I just tap to scan and it visually points an arrow that says go here? Right? This is the quickest route to whatever it is that you need to do inside of there. So those types of like instant performance support things, again, whether it's just telling you how to do a task, whether it's showing you how to get to a place, those types of things are the first things that come to mind. Marketing also, right? If you think, I always tell people that if L&D isn't just flush with cash, right? Like we typically aren't in that way, partner with like sales or marketing, because maybe there's ways that you can build immersive content that helps them, reach out to clients and members and things of that nature, outside of just the training aspect of it. How can you partner? How can you work together on stuff like that when it comes to these newer technologies?
Yeah. And Dan hit on some of the same points that I had talked about in a different way. It's those, back to the VR, it's the high consequences, lots of sensory things going on, complex activities, and not necessarily complex, you need to remember things, but complex environments and stuff going on are really high candidates. In our last minutes today, as we chat, I want to return back to how has AI affected VR in the world? And then also you talked about some different examples, which were great ones. Hey, you can practice that conversation over and over again. But honestly, I think about, hey, cost, time, etc. there. And I was like, well, you can have an avatar, me having 3D glasses on it. When does that actually help that environment that much more to make it worth it, other than, hey, I love doing this stuff, I want to do more of that, which obviously doesn't move the needle for the folks paying the bill.
Yeah, so AI has really, boy, I don't think I can remember a technology that hit so hard, so fast, and just completely overtook everything, right? I've seen, as a Gen Xer, I've seen all the technologies. I've seen them all, right? Like from riding around in my dad's Chevy Nova, listening to the Allman Brothers on an 8-track, to the VHS beta debate, the HD DVD Blu-ray debate, to how it all comes together,
our
right?
Phones is like
Exactly.
the closest thing to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then when the first iPad came out, or the iPod, or all of these things, right? I remember when MP3 players all used to look like these little pills that you just carried around, and you hoped that it all had in there. But it's all kind of cyclical, right? They were showing something about the new, they were talking about AirPods, where you have some sort of a control on the outside of the case, and I was like, that's just an iPod. Like, have we like bell bottoms have come back in style? Is that what we're doing here? Like, it all comes around. And I think that with the advent of AI and some of these other options, things like VR, maybe for some of those things, like you mentioned, they aren't a great fit anymore. Like, they maybe just really aren't. I think that if you had a full simulated space, let's say you're in the office, and your task was to walk through the office and complete certain processes or certain things, and through that you had to interact with avatars along the way, I think that there would be value in doing that in a headset where you're moving along, you're interacting. If it's a story that you're telling, if it's if it's a gamified experience that you're doing, because think about any kind of game that we maybe play either on our browser or on on our consoles or in a virtual reality headset. Those experiences are by far significantly more memorable and significantly more interactive than a lot of the things that we can create just how we do it typically, right? And a little bit different and more interactive than we can do with just some of these talking head AI pieces too.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it, and I think you made a good point that, hey, the game and thing. And so I was thinking, okay, if I'm moving into what I'm going to call a novel environment, like that mine example in there, where there's a lot of other things going on, it's not as exciting as a dungeon, in a Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, Doom scenario there. But you're exploring that, not as your main activity, but it's a reality you need to deal with. But again, to the office one, I'm going to play contrarian here. I mean, the office isn't that exciting. You could easily just go ahead. The walking part's not that interesting like it is in the game, because all of a sudden maybe someone will pop out and scare you or attack you or whatever. I mean, the office, you're going, and maybe you need to do those things, but just having a choice and jumping to those other avatars, having a branching scenario, lower cost, easier there. That's to me, I'm having a hard time buying that unless, there's certain things unique around. And I thought about, hey, maybe it's a complex room and it's a fire escape or something like that you need to know down pat. we're walking through that. There's a lot of tripping hazards, something that the environment. But what are your thoughts on that too? Or you get that argument when you're proposing?
Yeah, 100%, right? Why do we, I mean, that's the biggest thing, this sounds really neat, but why would we need something like this?
Mhm.
It's funny though. I'll jump back here real quick because I remember a time when we desperately wanted to get away from face-to-face
Yes.
interact with people, right? We desperately were like this stand-up stuff that we're doing. It's just not, some of the in-person stuff works, but some of this, just doesn't quite work. So then we went to the e-learning option, right? That kind of stuff. And now we've sort of come full circle, but now we have these AI avatars that are realistic, but still noticeably not real, right? Like no matter how, whatever, insert company name here, they're doing brilliant work. Like I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody, right? In there, but like, a lot of these, they're on a loop. Like I see the same, eyebrows and winks and nods and stuff like that. The voices are getting way better, right? The voices are sounding really good. I would say that depending on the story you're trying to tell, depending on the objective you're trying to reach, that is really going to be the determining factor of whether just an AI generated piece is going to work versus whether, maybe there's an opportunity for something more immersive. Now, I will say that probably drifting away a little bit from VR on some of those types of use cases into that mixed reality space may be a good sweet spot for that. And that's kind of what I'm actually hoping, so that as we develop for these newer hardware like glasses and stuff that we're going to be using, maybe there's an opportunity to plant an avatar there in the room with you. I don't have to create a brand new room. Maybe there's an opportunity to put these AI enhanced avatars in this room with me. And there's always something a little bit more, intimidating is the word that comes to mind, but I don't want it to be intimidating, right? But it's something a little more, tactile when there's someone standing there. I see them top to bottom. I can walk around them. I see what's happening, like this avatar, even though I know it's not a real person. There's something about that for me, and some of the feedback that we've received in the past that's like, wow, I didn't expect Tom to be so tall, right? I didn't expect them to have like the things we think about, like when we meet people on the web, on these webinars and stuff, then we meet them in person. It's like, oh, you're either taller or shorter or whatever than we thought, right?
There's something different than whatever impression you got for whatever reason. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So there's something to be said for that. But to your point, you're 100% right. Like it's really going to be dictated by use case, resources, desire, right? How are we best going to meet this objective? And, in some cases, groups have a little bit of money. They're excited to try something brand new, and they're willing to invest in that technology to try a couple different use cases to see what's actually going to stick for them.
Well, and I think you nailed something right there, talking about AI, talking to the augmented reality, the virtual reality of some of that, some of the things that haven't been done, of glasses, recognizing those different objects, providing you that information. We've all used what used to be called Shazam to identify the music and stuff. But, either it's having Mr. Clippy, old reference there for Windows folks, or maybe Tinkerbell, virtual reality helping you out there, or things coming in and popping in, which would be very hard to do without AI recognizing some of those things as they improve, just like you upload an image and it can recognize some of those aspects of it, of what you're looking at. So yeah, that's pretty exciting of what could happen with that, from the QR code, which, as you think about it, is that augmented reality and really providing a lot more useful information. I got a lot more out of the museum when I listened to those audio clips and information there. It made me actually go to my other computer, the phone, and look up stuff and read more on it too. So it's bringing you into that learning experience. Well, hey, anything you want to kind of share that you're looking forward to in the future, that you're just getting your hands on right now and seems to have promise? Who knows? Maybe it'll be a shiny squirrel that'll run away, but
Yeah, you know, the Gartner hype cycle is equally the hero and the villain in my life most of the time, right? Because I see all the technologies that I'm super excited about in the trough of disillusionment all the time.
Yeah.
Right? It had potential, and we haven't quite reached that point where they're useful yet. So I'm always desperately trying to find what's new and what's next and to see something that's going to work. You know, I think probably what I've been talking about with I'm really excited to see the new hardware, the glasses hardware that's coming out. I know that Meta came out with those Ray-Bans, the Meta Ray-Bans that were just the audio only stuff, which
Mhm.
I was really skeptical on when I first, like, for whatever reason I couldn't wrap my head around it. But once I did it, you know, and I tell you what, I took them with me when I went to Walt Disney World, and I used them to translate things in the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. You know how Star Wars has their own
Yep.
airbrush font. So I got to do that and have it scan to give me like all the Easter eggs and stuff like that of all the things that we're doing. And I was thinking when I was doing that, and we were at the store. I was with my wife. We were at the store, and a shirt that we were going to buy had language in an Asian font or whatever. So I used it to know what it said, and it was just something like
Mhm.
Kirby. Like it was just a Kirby shirt, right? So I just wasn't sure what it said underneath it. But I think those types of things are probably what have me the most excited. It also has a sort of real-time translation feature that they're
Mhm.
working through, like a universal translator. Again, we're
Yeah.
jumping into Star Trek, right? So I was using it, and I was listening to some videos and stuff from of people like that do like that it was Spanish. It was the one I think I was watching. Trying to take people through these learning and listening, and I had the closed captions on in English, listening to her talk in Spanish, and then also getting the feedback in there, and it relays it to your phone in real time too. And it was, maybe 50-60% accurate,
Mhm.
but the potential for stuff like that is huge, right? Like those types of enhancements. Now, if you just added a little display that helped me to do some of these other things so that I can be completely hands free, now that to me is the biggest thing. Like I want to put something on, I want to still be in the world around me so I can do stuff. But if I'm hands free and I can still do things while this is working, that I think is what has me the most excited about all of this. I don't have to like set it up. I don't have to find a boundary. I don't have to wear this giant thing on my face. I can put on something that helps to augment the world around me in a way that helps me to interact with it. Like you said, right? Whether I'm going to a museum, whether I'm hanging out at Disney World, whether I'm just at the store shopping for stuff, right? There's always something that comes up that I find myself going to my phone for. And I would love to see us to move from uh, our phones into something else that lets us be more hands-on with the world around us. So
Mm.
that's got me going.
That's exciting, and it gets back to that whole of what was the closest thing is really that change was before you just didn't know, or you used the yellow pages to look up something.
Yeah.
Now you have the magic box in your hand. Well, moving that magic box out and getting a lot more. It sounds like a little bit more towards the performance support, on-demand type
Yeah.
approach to it there, and a very different way of thinking of training and just learning in general, honestly.
Yeah. Your point there. Do you remember when we just didn't know stuff? Like if
Yes.
you woke up and like you were like, gosh, I wonder about this thing. And then you're
And if
like,
you're really industrious, you went to the encyclopedia or the library.
a library, exactly,
But
right?
most of
But
the time, most of us weren't that industrious.
that was so much work. Like I just walked around for so many years of my life just not knowing the answers to questions I had in my head. Right. So now it doesn't even matter how small or big the question is that's in my head. I can instantly find information about it. And I don't know if that's better or worse.
And that is another question for another time. I remember I was thrilled when I was a grad student and they searched the stacks for me. I didn't have to go back to it and
Yep.
delivered it to my mailbox, physical mailbox. So I I could read it there. And I was thrilled by that at that point. So
Yeah, I know. Ben, it's crazy. You were talking about museums, and I was all of a sudden I had this vision of walking through Graceland with a tape player and those foamy headphones that you used to have with the foam inserts, the Walkman essentially.
Which still exist in many museums.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like that's instantly where my head, I was like, oh, I visited Graceland one time and I had a tape recorder that told me about what was going on.
Well, hey, Desiree, it's been a true pleasure to have you today and get a chance to really immerse ourselves in that AR and immersive virtual reality environment of what you live every day. And thanks for sharing that with our audience. I think we'll go ahead and dance our way out. Thank you again for everyone for attending, and we look forward to chatting with you again in 2 weeks, and I'll be here.
Thanks so much for having me.